So as reports of the atrocities committed by Hamas terrorists on Israeli civilians continue to emerge, the Biden administration has drawn criticism for funneling cash to organizations in the Gaza Strip that partner with known terrorist groups. The United States sent $730 million to United Nations Palestinian Refugee Assistance Group that Republicans in Congress say lacks guardrails to prevent it from benefiting Hamas. Now, the question is, what will the State Department do? What will it take for them to reevaluate foreign aid that does not benefit U.S. national interest? Joining me now for a conversation on this and more, Congressman Chris Smith. He is the senior member on the House Committee on Foreign Affairs. He is also the co-chair of the Israel Allies Caucus and the Congressional Pro-Life Caucus. He represents the 4th Congressional District of New Jersey. Congressman Smith, welcome back to Washington Watch. Good to see you.
Tony, thank you for having me on, particularly during these very dark times.
Now, even before this weekend, because you and I have been talking about this, you've been sounding the alarm to the Biden administration about this money going to the Palestinian Authority and how this is benefiting terrorists.
No doubt. There's a group called UNRWA, the UN Works Relief Agency. We give them, as you pointed out correctly, well over $700 million. Their textbooks are rife with anti-Semitism, anti-Americanism. I've had hearings on it. I've had people read at my hearings what they actually say, show the drawings, the militarization of children. They've had pep rallies like we do for a football game or a basketball game to honor and to fet suicide bombers. It is absolutely outrageous. UNRWA and, of course, Hamas are just so committed to slaughter, to genocide. They're just like the Nazis. They believe in a final solution by just eliminating, eviscerating the Jewish people. And they teach it from the very, very earliest days in a child's life. And UNRWA is a part of it. And I have raised concerns with that for decades. Like I said, even holding hearings on it and they tell us they're cleaning up the textbooks. They're not. There are teachers deployed there that just teach terrorism to these little kids.
Right. I've seen it myself. I've gone to Israel with members of Congress and been briefed by a number of groups on the ground. I've seen the same material you're making reference to. And just to make very clear that this is not political, just yesterday, a federal judge in Texas allowed discovery to take place in a lawsuit against the Biden administration for funding the Palestinian Authority with money that goes to Hamas. And one of the other programs they have is what's called the pay to slay, where actually they are giving money to individuals who commit acts of terrorism, in some cases paying them for life.
Yes. Tony, I had my 15th congressional hearing in June on anti-Semitism, and the big focus was on what is happening in the Middle East. And we heard from a number of witnesses. Nashon Sharansky, the great human rights activist from Israel, was our lead witness, but we heard from Palestinian Media Watch, and they reminded us that 100% of all of the terrorists who are apprehended by Israel and sent to prison, they get a salary from the PLA. Their families are taken care of. And when they are finally, if they serve their jail sentence, they have a job waiting for them with the PLA. Abbas has shown himself to be very weak. He just made another statement, as you might recall, on October 3rd, just a few days ago, before the invasion, talking about how they want a Palestinian state with Jerusalem as its capital. You only do that with bayonets and bullets and murdering. But this pay-to-slay idea is outrageous. 100% of every one of the terrorists, 100% get a salary while they're in prison. I mean, what other civilized, this is not civilized, what other country or entity, it is an entity, does that?
Right.
It's barbaric.
In this stop during the Trump administration, there was the Taylor Force Act, where there
Yes.
was an American that was killed by terrorists in Israel. And this is something, again, we've seen it, I've heard it. Other members of Congress have been pushing this forward and finally got traction during the Trump administration. And this lawsuit in Texas, who one of your colleagues is actually a plaintiff in, Congressman Ronnie Jackson of Texas, is based upon the Biden administration actually violating the law by sending this money to the Palestinian Authority.
Without a doubt, there's been a whole series of things that the Biden administration has done to enable terrorists. You could say it's unwittingly. I think it's perhaps naive, but it might be with malice. But they certainly have done it. And they've done that especially with Iran. Now they do about 3 million barrels a day. It was 400,000 before. They are getting so much money through that. This whole horrific idea of giving them $6 billion, freeing that up, claiming that it's for humanitarian purposes. Money is fungible. It's going to be used for terrorism, and they are the world's top terrorist nation, especially in the Middle East, but the world's worst. We need sanctions on this horrible regime, not enabling. And I am just baffled at it. Even their broadcast mechanism got a buy and an allowance, again, reversing a previous position by the Trump administration. But Taylor Force, that was an attempt to say, stop it. And we did stop a lot of money.
Right.
And unfortunately, the European Commission stepped in and doubled down and provided additional monies to their shame.
Just to be very clear here, I want our listeners to understand, Congressman Smith, that we're talking about Iran being able to have these assets that were frozen, that $6 billion. But we're talking about here, what you've been driving is the issue of U.S. tax dollars going to fund the Palestinian Authority. Yes. And you've seen the stuff in the textbooks. I've seen it. We talk about the indoctrination of our children here in America through our public schools, and that's bad. But part of, I believe, when I've seen the video coming out of Israel, I've heard the reports from those on the ground about the atrocities. I'm not surprised, given the indoctrination of how the Jewish people are portrayed in educational material under the Palestinian Authority.
Absolutely. There was in the South Pacific, Rodgers and Hammerstein's musical, there was a famous song that you've got to be taught to hate. They are teaching the entire next generation. They're radicalizing them from the very, very smallest of ages, youngest of ages. And surprise, surprise, they become brutal killers, psychotics, who go to concerts and kill and maim and rape and take hostages. They behead little babies. Where do you learn that? You learn that because you've been inculcated in a culture that hates Jews. It is demonic, in my opinion.
Yes.
They hate Americans too,
yes.
But Jews are the highest.
It is demonic. We only have about a minute left, Congressman Chris Smith. You also serve as the chairman of the Pro-Life Caucus. You've done so much for the sanctity of human life. I just want to ask you about this because there was a Carrie Lake, who's running for the United States Senate, announced last night that she's running. And I'm a little troubled by her statement on life, because she says this on her website. She says, abortion is, as the courts decided, an issue for states to decide, not the federal government. That is so wrong. That's not what the court decided.
No. She obviously didn't read the opinion, the Alito and the concurring opinion by Kavanaugh, which made very clear that lawmakers at every level, including states and federal, can set regulations, can prohibit it if they want, based on the legislative process. We have a huge role to play. I believe in protective statutes. I'm a co-sponsor of the bill for Heartbeat to protect lives at a very, very young age. And then there's the other one dealing with pain capable. So we have a role to play, and if we abscond and turn tail, we will see many states like my own, where abortion on demand till birth is the law of the state of New Jersey, given to us by Governor Murphy. And there are many other states like that, Colorado, California, New York. They're slaughtering kids right till birth. They behead them, dismember them, chemically poison them.
We've got to take a stand. And I know you're leading that effort. And clearly the federal government has a role legally and morally to do something. Congressman Chris Smith, we're out of time. Thanks for joining us, my friend.
Thank you so much.